find music a useful distraction, a focus tool. If I'm effective, it's because of one simple fact.
I don't give a fuck.
My name is Devyn.
My name is Georg, and this is Medicinema, your healthy dose of film. Today we are discussing two thrillers, the often quoted Rear Window by Alfred Hitchcock and the new 2023 release by David Fincher, The Killer. But before we get into that, Devyn, how are your Christmas preparations coming along?
Oh my god. There's like 3 days to Christmas as of the time we're recording this, and it feels like I haven't done anything, despite being literally busy all week. I mean, we didn't got a tree. I assume you guys do trees there, right?
Yeah.
To go out and cut them down.
Mhm.
We went and did that, you know. We do this thing called Elf on the Shelf. Do you know what that is?
No, but 1 second real quick. Do you cut down your own trees? Like literally go?
I do. I go out into the woods and I legitimately, well, not woods. I go out into like a big field where they sell Christmas trees, and I take a saw and I get on the ground and I cut down the tree. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I bought mine. Someone else did the cutting.
No, that's amazing. I mean, I wish that that's what we had done. But yeah, no, we cut down the tree, and then we have this thing called Elf on the Shelf, which is a terrible new American tradition that's not been around very long. But it's essentially this little stuffed little elf doll that like moves around every day. Every day it's in a different spot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of it. The kids aren't supposed to touch it. It loses its magic or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But my wife has upped it to where like some days the elf sprayed shaving cream all over the bathroom as a joke and he played a prank. Or this day he spread glitter all over the house, leading to a trail. And like there's like a big like flower all over the table with a note that says, "Let's make cookies in the morning," or whatever. And like, so it's like really cool for my kids, but it's just been like every day has been like another like big thing that you have to do. And it's cool, but you know, it's a lot. It's a lot right before Christmas.
It sounds like something I would have enjoyed as a kid and would hate to do as an adult for kids.
That's pretty apt, honestly, to what it's like. Yeah, but it's, you know, they love it, so it's fun to do for them. Yeah. How about yourself? What have you been getting ready to do for Christmas?
Just buying presents and getting that all prepared. I'm pretty much done on that, and we also already have the tree up. I pretty much got through all my Christmas preparations early this year. I'm kind of surprised by myself, but the one thing I can talk a little bit about is Christmas movies. Ever since I was a kid, the Home Alone films, the first two,
Yes,
are really nostalgic to me. Watch them pretty much every year around the Christmas time. And last year, my brother and I decided to watch Home Alone 3 for the first time.
Oh no!
Oh yeah, we're
With
going down that road.
With the bowl cut kid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't rewatch that this year, but this year we continued on with the series. We watched 4 and 5. We're still missing one. There's a 6th one that released like
Just this year or something. Yeah, this year, last year. Yeah.
last Christmas. They are all horrible. Like there's no way around it. But the 4th one was actually kind of interesting because it's so bizarre with the decisions that they made. I enjoyed that one the most, just due to the fact that if you try to make sense of the logic, the in-universe logic, everything falls apart. In the 3rd one, they didn't try to, you know, do the whole, we're recasting because we couldn't get Macaulay Culkin.
They just use a different kid, whole different character.
Yeah, different name, different family, different story. But for the 4th one, they said, yeah, fuck this, we're doing Kevin again with a different kid. And somehow his family has only 2 siblings now. But it's definitely implied that it's the same family because some burglars show up and one of them is called Marv and he knows Kevin because Kevin got them into prison. So it plays after the first one. It plays before the second one, apparently. So it's an alternate universe, if you think about it, where the paths split. And all of a sudden, we're home again. Marv got out. The other one is still in prison. So I guess one of them just escaped. They are all recast. No one is the same person. Age-wise, it doesn't make sense, because in the first Home Alone, Kevin is 9 years old, and in this one, he's 9 years old, but they already know each other, so how did that happen? Yeah, there's a lot of things that absolutely make no fucking sense in this movie, but it was fun to think about.
I'm just looking at the Letterboxd here. It says that he's now living with his dad because his parents have split up, which I assume is why he only has half the siblings. Is because half went with mom, half went with dad, I guess.
No, not really. Like the three of them discuss where they should spend their Christmas and if they spend it with dad or with mom. Like it is implied that those are the only siblings.
But it looks like Marv was recast as French Stewart, who is a fucking great actor. He's a fun guy. Looks and seems nothing like the two dudes from the first movie.
Yeah.
It's literally one of the worst castings I've ever seen. And he pairs with this chick named Vera, or Missy Pyle. Missy Pyle was in this, and that's crazy to me too. Wow, what a fever dream.
Yeah, it's a weird movie.
I'm not gonna lie, I was young. I was a little kid at the time. I liked Home Alone 3. I know it's terrible. But it just hit me. It hit for me when I was like 9 years old or something. I was like,
I can see that.
He's using an RC car. How cool is that? He likes video games too, or something like that, you know. But yeah, no, that just seems like good luck. Good luck on the sixth one, man.
Yeah, I will need it.
That's a fun trip you're taking, though. I'm not gonna lie. With that, you want to move into the big stuff?
Sure, let's do it.
Our first film for this appointment is the 4-time Academy Award-winning 1954 Hitchcock mystery, Rear Window. It is an adaptation of the 1942 Cornell Woolrich novel, It Had to Be a Murder. A chamber piece starring James Stewart and Grace Kelly, it is often considered one of the greatest films ever made. George, what did you think of this movie?
Rear Window, absolute classic. This was probably my first Hitchcock that I really loved. I had seen some Hitchcock before, but I didn't really see all the appeal. I was still young at the time, and I hadn't seen that much classic cinema before. But this one really got me.
You saw this a long time ago.
Yeah, I saw this a few years ago the first time.
Okay.
I absolutely think it holds up. The tension the movie builds throughout it is fantastic. There's so many just visual qualities this film has to offer that don't age at all, with this giant set they built of this courtyard and the camera movements. It feels still up to date. It feels still of quality.
We'll get there, but I definitely think there's a few things in this movie that have kind of aged.
Okay.
But as far as the actual cinematography and filming techniques, no, this movie's grand. It's absolutely fantastic. This was my first viewing of it, actually. I already like Hitchcock stuff. This was just one I had kind of not hit yet. It's got some strange notes for me. The actual meat of the story and the characters themselves. That's where the aging is for me. But I think, I think this movie rocks, man. Really sucks you in. James Stewart is one of my favorite old time actors, so it's cool to see him here in this kind of movie.
I guess we can directly start at the opening.
Please do.
This is just incredible visual storytelling, what he does here. The opening shot starts with this sweeping camera move from looking out of the window, seeing the courtyard first, pushing back, showing us the protagonist sitting by the window, revealing the broken leg, then moves further, shows us a broken camera, tilts up, shows us a print of a car crash, which we can assume is the picture he took that got him into this state, you know? Those cars seem to be flying at the camera. And just with that, that's like a 10-second shot. There's so much already established. We know the situation. We know our protagonist. We know how he got here. We know his job. We know where he lives. We know that he's stuck here right now. And we already saw the window and, the courtyard where all of the drama will take place further along. There's so much efficiency in that. It's done without any cuts. It's, that's just on point.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a visual storytelling at its best, honestly, in the first 30 seconds of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's little details in that, by the way, I want to add into that I really appreciate. We're sweeping down and we're seeing the woman make the sculpture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she yells to somebody, "I call it hunger." And it's this sculpture with a hole in the center of it and a little bit at the top, like kind of representative of a body with like a missing piece inside them, right? They could have called that sculpture anything, but somebody looked at that and went, no, if I was really making this, I would call this piece hunger. And like that meant something to somebody for a second, at least. And I thought that was a really, really, really cool, thoughtful detail that they could have never had, but somebody really thought about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful.
There's a lot of those little things, moving in that whole scene. It's kind of funny to look at some films retrospectively and see their influences. This shot is famously really well used in the movie Kung Fu Hustle. It's the same type of idea. You're getting this huge view of the whole pavilion and all the people who live there until it zooms down to the feet of the main protagonist or whatever, right? And it's literally taken from the entire idea is taken from this movie. And I would have never known that until I saw this. And it's interesting to see, like, oh, that's where they got that, exactly where they got that from.
Yeah, and that is also a very, I think, unique experience about Rear Window, that this movie is pretty much everywhere. And I will get into the reasoning, I think, why particularly this movie, out of all of the big classics, gets quoted so much. But yeah, it's just this concept alone of staring out of the window and looking into the privacy of the neighbors is something that has come up quite a lot. There's even other classics that really are famous on their own that do that. I'm thinking of A Short Story About Love by Krzysztof Kieslowski, the Polish big director that did the Decalogue thing and stuff like that.
Oh yes, I've seen those.
That movie is pretty much, that takes this idea of a guy always staring out of the window through his spyglasses, basically, and kind of turned it into a love story and talked about the ethics of that. And
well, I mean, it's, the movie portrays this guy as a photographer, which is a really great way to have him use the telephoto lens and that whole filming technique. But it's also, I think, them trying to show, like, that's why he is so willing to be voyeuristic, because he already kind of has that hint to him, right? Because he's a photographer.
Yes.
But in reality, this movie can appeal to almost everybody because everybody's a little voyeuristic. And everybody likes to look into windows when they walk past that are wide open. Like, why? You know what I mean? Like, it's just a human nature thing to wonder what's in that window. This movie hides that really well behind the photographer profession. But I think it's one of the reasons why it's so impactful, is because it hits everybody.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess we can get into it. This is also the reason why I think particularly filmmakers get hit by it so much, because they just see themselves in it, Hitchcock himself probably saw himself in that character. Whenever you make a film, even if it's a fake story, you're always holding the lens into the privacy of those characters portrayed, This movie is very much an analogy of filmmaking as a whole, I feel like, where we're constantly breaching privacy and we're entering private spaces that, I don't know, a marriage story, you're not supposed to be a part of relationship drama like that. You're not supposed to see that. You're not supposed to hear that, what happens between two people in a very dramatic moment. But through film, we can be an observer of that and really be that voyeuristic person and be that person who, is too nosy without feeling bad about it.
No, that makes perfect sense. I think, I'm trying to think of anything I can even say back to that, honestly. That's pretty succinct. It's really well put. It being an analogy to filmmaking is really interesting. I never would have considered that. I think as our listeners who don't know us and get to know us will come to understand, I'm a pretty surface level guy. And I'm just like, this is a movie that's analogy is that neighbors are nosy people and people like to snoop. But that's awesome actually to think about it like that. They see the story. They see the story in reality.
Yeah.
And that's what he's building in this movie. So he's building this story.
There's even in the opening shot, the movie starts off with the curtains rising like the curtains in a theater before we see through the window and see all the entertainment of today's program, I guess, which is, the voyeurism of looking into those other lives.
Very nice. I like that.
I listened to a commentary track watching it this time around by John Farwell. I hope I pronounced his name right, who's a film historian and who wrote a book on Rear Window specifically. And he pointed out an interesting little detail about the whole camera thing. He always tells his film students, whenever you think there is a sexual innuendo in a Hitchcock film, you're probably right, and it is. He was very much... he was very
it's in
much
the name, Alfred Hitchcock. It's in the name.
Yeah. And he embraced that.
Yeah.
Just the fact that he is often, distracted by the neighbor, the dancing neighbor, and stuff like him putting the giant telephoto lens in his lap. You can draw conclusions from that, and how through his looking at others, through the voyeurism, he really experiences sexuality, because with his partner, he very much feels like he can't perform right now, He's stuck in his chair, she is taking care of him. He feels really demasculated. And through watching those people, he can feel that little kinkiness, I guess.
Yeah, he gets that exhilaration out of it. There's honestly, and that's a big part of it for him that you can see is the voyeurism, the watching the people is getting him off a little bit almost about it.
Yeah.
But there's nothing else for him to do either, so I mean it makes a lot of sense for him.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk a little bit more about the masculinity thing, actually. That is one of the places where, this movie, I think, definitely shows its age a little bit.
Okay.
He challenges her on her ability to do what he does because she's a woman and because she's not that kind of woman or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then she comes back at him with I brought a suitcase over and I could live in the suitcase. And it is the daintiest, girliest little suitcase in the universe. And it just embraces this she's still a woman or whatever. And I think that was kind of aged of the movie, that's not really how we would approach a film now, I think, in filming.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because John Farwell actually addressed that very suitcase in the commentary track, where, to him at least, it feels like a powerful move for her, because yes, she adheres to the dreams, I guess, the James Stewart character has of what a woman should be that could fit into his lifestyle, I guess. But she does so on her own turf. She is very much a cultivated woman, and she is very much someone who has style and looks out for those kind of things in life. And by bringing that kind of suitcase, she kind of found her own way into the things he tries to make her do. She found her own style within that.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. That actually makes a lot of sense. All right. I'll take one off the it aged badly list. You win this one. I'll get you later. Trust me.
Okay. Looking forward to defend Hitchcock over here.
To be fair, I do really like Hitchcock. He did a television series that he was only so muchly involved with, but I grew up with that pretty regularly. The Hitchcock Presents, quite like that. I guess I'll just jump off into that real quick because it's where we would be, I guess, in the movie a little bit. We meet his insurance person, what does she do? She like gives him massages. She like,
Yeah.
that's not a job that's around anymore. I don't think so. I
don't
don't
know.
really know what you call that lady's profession, but she works for the insurance company somehow. But she's talking to him, and I get that in relativity, what she says makes sense, but she refers to him, and a couple people do later too, as a young man. And I'm going to be real honest. That ain't a young James Stewart. That's just not what that is. That is a gray silver fox Stewart, and it's really weird.
Yeah.
We'll get into later that they kind of guffaw, they kind of tilt their heads up at a couple that has an incredibly similar age gap to themselves, and I thought that was really funny. But yeah, she calls him young, which is really strange. And that kind of feeds into, for me, a little bit, one of the things about this movie is that he kind of plays out like a paranoid old guy, like just shouting at the clouds sometimes. And I don't know if that was the intent of the film or not, but I kind of like it. I kind of like that that's what happens here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is intentional. Just the fact that he is so... He's pushing her away so much, and there's this line where he says about the dinner, it's perfect as always. He's almost annoyed by the fact that he can't push her away that much because she is just so perfect for him, and he just tries to desperately find problems. So yeah.
See, I took that as I guess almost the same thing, that he doesn't like a perfect life. He likes that life with like, trekking through the jungle or being sweaty or being whatever. He likes that. And this everything being perfect all the time is just too mundane for him. It's too strict for him. He doesn't really want to be that. It represents the cast on his leg almost.
Maybe. Interesting thought. Yeah, I haven't thought about it that way. Yeah, to me it felt more like playing into the masculinity side of things, She is very much someone who can take care of herself and in addition take care of him, whilst, as the man in the family, you are supposed to take care of everything. You are supposed to protect her and, not the other way around, really.
Interesting.
So her being perfect with everything, I just took that as one of the things that, kind of takes away from his masculinity, because he doesn't have to do anything if she's already perfect.
That makes a lot of sense. Even in that sense, having somebody help you nowadays would just be like, oh, my, friend is helping me or whatever. And in that era, it was seen as emasculating. It kind of says something about it when it was made and the social climate, I guess, of the time.
Mm-hmm. Another way to look at this movie, which I thought was fascinating, people have looked at this movie and at all the neighboring characters as almost subconscious mirrors of the true protagonist characters. An early on hint at this is when Jeff on the phone says, 6 weeks of doing nothing but looking out of the window, staring at the neighbors, you gotta get me out of here. When he says looking out of the window and doing nothing, you see on screen the composer get out of his chair, looking frustrated at the window, followed by, can't you see me coming home to a nagging wife, as the camera moves to another window where at this very moment the husband is coming home from work and the nagging wife is already waiting for him. So he sees himself in different ways in the neighbors, in the male character neighbors. And the Grace Kelly character also has this, where that sad, lonely woman living all the way on the ground floor.
Yes, the bottom woman. Yes.
Yeah.
The one that I'll get to later about her relationship age gap. Yes.
Oh, yeah, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Now you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Go on.
That sad, lonely woman talking to a man that is not truly present is again like a parallel. Like early on, you have that scene where she has kind of like a candlelight dinner with herself, and nobody's showing up, but she is like pretending, and she dressed up all nice, and she's talking to an empty chair. That is really a parallel to Lisa, who tries to have a relationship with this man who we're watching right now, who in an emotional way isn't really present with her. Ironically, he toasts the neighbor even when she like toasts her imaginary friend. James Stewart toasts back, and he shows almost more empathy to her than he shows Lisa in the beginning of the movie.
That's interesting.
Later on, we even get visual parallels in that imaginary date sequence. I'm pretty sure it was then that said neighboring woman wears a green dress and has a big pearl bracelet on her hand. And later on, we see Grace Kelly walking around in a green dress and and pretty much the same giant pearl bracelet on her hand. That's such a specific choice that, I just can't imagine that is anything but on purpose to show them both. And later on in that scene when Grace Kelly is in the murderer's apartment, you even have the visual parallels of seeing Grace Kelly's character and the neighbor right underneath in the window below pretty much move in sync, do the same moves, and we see both of them at the same time. So it very much implies that they are somewhat similar characters.
See, now I've just got all these theories that it's all in his head. Thanks. These are all just fragments of his psyche now to me.
Yeah, for sure. To a degree, for sure. Like, I think it all still happened, but it's definitely portraying different sides of his subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
There's mostly negative portrayals of marriage in it. We know that he is very much not into the whole relationship thing, and other people try to talk him into it more so than he tries to get into it.
There's something interesting when you think about movies from a character's perspective are usually just a film following a character. That's really what that means. And in reality, people perceive things differently. Sometimes people do make things up, or their bias leans them to one thing or another, or noticing one thing or another, etc. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If we say that these things that he's seeing are projections of his self and his subconscious, then it's really interesting because we're really watching a movie actually from somebody's perspective rather than just from their point of view more than anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
And that's kind of a cool idea.
Yeah, the fact that the camera is, for 99% of the movie, always stays with him in that room, I think very much on a visual side represents that we are watching through his eyes. We are watching through his tainted perspective of reality.
That's pretty cool. I like that a lot. I really do. I do really appreciate. Maybe that's why he heard "young man."
Yeah,
that's a joke more than anything. That's more than a joke than anything.
but it kind of implies, he probably sees himself still as a young man, despite him laying there, all being taken care of and stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, he talks about like him going on adventures, and she needs to be ready for that, whilst we only see him as someone who needs to be taken care of. So there's definitely a difference between the things he thinks about himself and the way he actually is in the moment.
Yeah, man. You know what's funny is that when I watched this with my wife. She watched part of it. We were sitting there and we were kind of talking about it afterward. And she's like, "So did you write down many notes?" And I didn't. I only wrote down like 5 or 6 major notes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just thinking about it, and I was thinking, this is one of those movies that for me is really good. But it doesn't leave me with a lot that I feel like there is to talk about it specifically. It's just one of those like fantastic movies. But this has really, really changed my perspective on that, because I would have never thought about these things, but they make perfect sense. Honestly, a lot of this makes so much sense. I would have never considered half of these things.
I have to give credit, it's not like I came up with all of these things. Those are thoughts that way smarter people already had before me, and I'm just trying to kind of find my own examples of it and find my own perspective on it. So, yeah, but I watched a documentary that came with the Blu-ray about this movie, The Ethics of Rear Window, I think it's called.
Very
And
cool.
yeah, the commentary track also helped a lot. Just quickly going back to the whole subconscious thing, his disdain from marriage, I think the best example of that is that there's one window or like one neighboring family that we barely see at all. And I think that that's the only happy married couple or the only happy family in that courtyard. It's very high up. There's a small balcony and we never directly see it, but in several shots, it is like barely in frame. You can still see it a bit when the camera moves by, and all that we see is like happy children playing there. Sometimes there's a couple.
Yeah, there's a scene where the dad is like getting the daughter ready for bed up on that balcony, which I thought was, by the way, super bizarre. Why are you changing your daughter into her like nightgown on a balcony? That's weird. But
Yeah.
no, I do remember that family you're talking about.
Yeah, that's pretty much the only family that never gets the front and center point of view. You know, they are always on the side. And since the camera doesn't look directly at them, and we already talked about the camera being a representation of the protagonist's point of view, he doesn't look at them. He tries to ignore that part. What he looks at are the relationship struggles happening around him, because, you know, he doesn't want to accept the fact that maybe relationships could also be something positive.
Other than the couple I'm about to mention, representing the idea of resilience and keeping trying, why the hell is that one couple sleeping on the balcony?
I'm not sure.
I don't really get that. Like, I get when you say what you're saying, like why, like what they represent in this. They represent the idea of like, you know, keeping it going no matter what the struggle is, and they keep trying, and they kind of seem to be positive through most of it, surprisingly, right? Positive through hardship and trying to get beyond hardship. But I don't understand why that's their hardship. I don't know if that's another thing that like just didn't age well, or maybe that's like a big city Brooklyn thing I don't understand. But yeah, I would love it if I could find out why the hell those people slept on their balcony with their bed out there and stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I have another little observation to talk about. There's a little side story going on with the songwriter.
With him trying to like get love.
Yeah, but also with him just trying to find that song that he's supposed to work on, you know? Throughout the movie, at several points, we see him struggle composing a tune. And in the very beginning, it's only just a crude melody. And throughout the film, that very song reappears, and it's always more fleshed out. And there's an interesting thing with the Grace Kelly character, because she is fascinated by that song. When it plays the first time, she like walks towards the window and makes a remark of how beautiful it is.
So exact words are, it's like he's writing it for us.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And then, so, you know, we're going to come finally around to this whole thing of, I think their age gap is really interesting, yet later when the composer and the lady in the green get together, the lady in the green is a good deal older than that composer, very clearly. And they look at them and they're like, oh, to each their own, I guess, despite probably being the same age gap, just the gender being different. So I wonder if that's actually on purpose too.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't thought about it that way.
Or if it's just that back then it was normal for like 50-year-old dudes to date like 23-year-old women, but not the opposite. Because that's really plausible as well.
Just adding on to the whole composer thing, because it adds to the culmination of several little side stories in the moment when Lisa entered the murderer's apartment. Because at that point, the song by the composer is done, and he has a whole band in his apartment at that moment, and he starts playing the finished version of that theme, which additionally is actually called Lisa's theme. So the whole day he's writing it for us is very much nod to reality of things. Yeah, in that moment when the finished version plays, both Lisa and the suicidal lady down below get drawn to the window, finishing the whole mirroring image of them, the parallels, and it stops the suicide attempt of the sad lady. And additionally, for Lisa, is an interesting character moment because Lisa finally gets Jeff's attention since she has become one of the people staring out of the window that he peeps into. She is on the other side of things finally, and finally Jeff really pays attention to her. And I think that's a really interesting part of the thing that I haven't thought about on earlier viewings, but this time around I really realized.
Yeah, I would have never seen that. That's really good too. Yeah. Real quick, because you did watch so many little bits of extra stuff. Do you know anything about how they filmed this? Like physically, with like the amount of cameras they used or anything like that?
I can't really tell on the amount of cameras, but there's an interesting thing of how they made the set.
Okay, yeah.
Because this was basically too big for a usual set stage. And what they did was that those set stages usually have a double floor where you have another few meters down below the regular stage floor where a lot of the technology would be situated.
Yeah.
They took out that double floor so they can have a few more meters of height and built the set basically over several floors high. Something that pretty much never has been done before. I don't know if it has been done later, but Hitchcock took all his power in his hand and was like, yeah, I need more room. Give me a bigger set.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. I'm gonna be rounding back to that in our next film. Yeah, it definitely feels like a set. It doesn't feel like a real place. I think that kind of adds to it. We live in a time where so many things are shot on location now, and so many things aren't really filmed on sets really as much, it feels like. I don't know. That might be wrong. I could be totally wrong. It just feels like a lot of things are on, like, on location now. But this just feels like almost like a play set. And that really works for the closeted nature of this movie. They call it a chamber piece. It's like it's all in one set and stuff, and it really feels condensed. I like that feeling.
I'm not really sure if we're filming that much more on practical things. I think we're almost beyond that point again, where at this point a lot of the practices right now are filming like within the volume, which is kind of the modern version of filming everything indoors in a stage, those 360 degrees screens where, I think Mandalorian was the first where they really used it. A lot of things are shot within those nowadays. So I feel like we're going back from the filming in the actual place again. And I kind of wish we wouldn't, because now we kind of lost both. We lost the reality of the actual sets, but we also kind of lost the charm of the practical sets that, someone like Hitchcock built in those ginormous stage.
No, you're probably not wrong with that, honestly. Especially, the rise of CGI has been, insane for films. Things like The Flash, how much of that is actually, not just background CGI and shit. One thing that I think really made me laugh about this movie, there was a lot of moments actually that made me laugh in this movie, whether they just be like silly one-liners, which you said this movie's really quotable, and I'd like to hear what some of those were, because I didn't remember any, but I wish I did.
Quickly, when I say quotable, I mean the imagery, cinematic quotes where the whole idea of watching through the window and the concept of being stuck in that place and looking out of it. That is really what I meant by that. Not like in an actual quoting the lines, but quoting the cinematography, quoting the setups, basically.
That's fair. Yeah, because there's some really funny lines to me in this movie. So you said this movie's quotable, and so I've sat here and heard it, and I've looked up some of these quotes, and some of these ones that I really liked that I thought were the absolutely just, they just made me laugh. Lisa says, "I wish I could be creative. And LB Jeffrey says, "Oh, sweetie, you have a great talent for creating difficult situations." I about spit out my juice, and my wife was like, "How dare he mention me in a film?" Um, it there's so many. See, when am I gonna see you again? Not for a long time, or at least until tomorrow night, is absolutely hilarious. But one thing that made me and my wife laugh more than anything else was the scene where I forget the male friend's name that they have, the older guy friend that comes over, but they all drink the whiskey together that
Mhm,
they have. And they stand there, and it ends with the one guy drinking the whiskey and like spilling it on himself, right?
mhm.
But they stand there and have a near like 5 minute conversation, and all of them just stir the whiskey the entire time. And me and my wife were just like, take a drink, just please take a drink. Please just take one. Nobody's gonna take a damn drink of this whiskey. And it literally no one takes a damn drink until the very end and the guy spills it everywhere, which was really honestly great relief in the end. So I wonder if that was on purpose. I wonder if people were like, "Hey, should I take a drink of this now?" And he was just like, "Nah, not yet. Hold it."
Yeah.
Just keep holding it. Or if it was really bad drink or something, or like I wonder. But there's a like you said with Hitchcock, if you think something was for a reason, there probably was, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder what that is. That's my thing.
Yeah, I absolutely give him full credit for that. Like a lot of people tend to forget that not only was Hitchcock good with building tension, obviously, that's pretty much what he's known for, and being good on a technical level with camera and how to film stuff, but he was a very funny man. Like, hands down,
Very funny.
he had a great sense of humor. And yeah, I absolutely think the comic relief moments in this movie are essential to the endurance of this movie, that it's still
On one more note about the humor of this movie, there was one line that I thought was especially funny, and my wife was like, "That was sexist," and I was like, "What?" I just thought it was the character actually just being witty. But the line is when they mentioned that the dog was killed too when it was sniffing around that area,
yeah.
and the insurance woman says, "The dog knew too much," and everybody just kind of looks at her like she's an idiot. I thought that was her just being funny, and my wife says, "No, it's the writer just writing women sexist."
I'm kind of confused as to how how does it paint a negative portrayal of that character?
I think that she said it because she thought it was funny. My wife thinks that the character said it because she believed it, which would imply that woman dumb.
Yeah, but even if she believed that she was right, like that's kind of the point. Like,
that's really funny though.
yeah, but
Yeah.
that's kind of the point. He killed the dog because he was digging all the time where he shoveled some of the remains, right? Like,
Yeah.
even if it wasn't meant as a joke but serious, then she was the only one realizing the actual situation of things. So, yeah, I didn't take it as any negative
That's fair.
at all.
I thought it was hilarious. Just her deliver the dog knew too much.
Yeah.
And everybody kind of looks at her like she's a fool. Oh, that really got me. I like this.
I actually have one visual note that I'd like to add on to that, because that scene is the only time the camera leaves the apartment. The only time where we leave the subjective view of the protagonist and have a more objective view of the situation, because the camera is down with that woman in the courtyard as they find the dead dog. And I think the reason for that is because everyone within the neighborhood, they all unite in that moment. Everyone but the murderer, everyone together grieves over the loss of that poor innocent dog. And I think that's the reason why the camera is down below in the courtyard, because it doesn't represent his view anymore. It represents the view of the courtyard, really, of everyone who is part of that courtyard.
Yeah, okay. Or if we want to take, the new look, it's that he finally like defeated the damaged part of his psyche so the rest of his psyche can reunite in a better way. In like a healed fashion, right?
Yeah, that's lovely. Sure.
Oh my gosh. What is that movie? I don't want to spoil that movie. I'm not gonna spoil that movie. There's a movie that is similar to the idea of that, honestly. I liked it a lot. I'm really happy to finally watch this. Like I said, I love Hitchcock. This just adds to that. I'm aware he's a terrible human being. He was a terrible guy, terrible, terrible guy. But God, man, the good dude could make a movie, right?
Yeah, he was really ahead of his time with all the understanding of this art form, for sure. I have one more final note, which is more of if people wanna still dig more into this movie, there are some alleys that we haven't even touched yet. I found something online about you can look at this movie and apply Freudian theories onto it, and
Oh
it
no.
had to be intentional because it is well known that Hitchcock was a big fan of Freudian psychology, and if you want to look into that, then pay attention to the way they use purses in this movie, the way they are hidden when you see them, what is it put inside the purse, who owns the purse, who handles the purse, and then Google the definition Freud had for purses and what they meant.
I mean, even the telescopic lens in
Yeah.
the lap is straight Freudian stuff. Yeah.
There's a lot of to dig there if people still want to get more out of this movie.
And with that, George, I think you have our next prescription.
Yes, the second movie we're going to talk about today is The Killer. After the black and white drama Mank, this is very much a return to familiar turf with David Fincher's filmography. Almost to a comical degree, one might say. The Killer is a pretty simple, straightforward thriller. We follow a nameless serial killer played by Michael Fassbender. For the first third of the film, he prepares and explains his current job to us, his current hit job. And despite all his talk about his aim for perfection, that job goes very wrong. And for the remaining runtime, we follow him trying to clean up his mistakes and get rid of everyone who might be a problem to him going forward. Devyn, I know you didn't love this movie that much, but before we got into that, I wanted to ask you, how familiar are you with David Fincher's general filmography, and what's your relationship to him as a filmmaker?
Obviously, Fight Club. Fight Club was one of my favorite films in my life growing up. I loved it. It was probably the second DVD I ever purchased. I saw it a million times. I live 20 minutes away from the guy who wrote it. It was a big one for me. I didn't see Zodiac until a long time later. I like that one. You know, Panic Room was something I grew up with. Alien 3, I like that. Surprisingly. Gone Girl was one I only recently saw, which I did really enjoy. I think he's pretty good. You know, he hits for me, but when you said comically, it's almost comically a return, right?
Mhm.
Can I guess that is because this movie feels like it was made in 2005? Is that not what you mean?
It isn't directly, but it also isn't too wrong either. To me, this...
Not in a bad way.
Yeah,
Not in
yeah.
a bad way. I don't mean that like disrespectfully, because there's great movies from 2005.
Yeah. I didn't take it that way. You already mentioned Panic Room. I think The Game is also one that really applies here. This feels like David Fincher being somewhat self-aware about the fact that this isn't the biggest story, this doesn't have the most depth to it, but it is very much a tension-driven thriller, and with stuff like Panic Room and The Game, he already showed that he can be great at those. You know, those movies, they didn't move the world, they didn't change cinema forever, and they probably would have been forgotten if it wasn't a David Fincher film at this point. But the fact that he is so proficient with the technical side of filmmaking, he just elevates those simple stories to something that is very near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. And I feel like The Killer is very much falls into that thing where all of those things I just said about The Game and Panic Room can be applied to The Killer. And again, I think it's really David Fincher's technical finesse that elevates this movie a lot.
I want to add on to what you're saying about it being, you know, it feels like a Fincher. The story isn't really strong, etc., etc., etc. I've never really known what people mean when they say like, "Oh, it really feels like a Netflix movie." I haven't really gotten that yet. But I think, if I had to define it, I would define it as The Killer, as a movie that has good actors doing good acting, a good director doing good work, great cinematography, a buttload of money probably thrown at it, and it looks great, but there's not a lot of meat on its bones. And it's kind of just a movie you watch and go, okay, that was a good Sunday flick. I'm going to move on to the next thing. That, as you said, would have just been forgotten if the name Fincher wasn't attached to this one specifically.
Mhm.
This is the first time I felt like, oh, this is just a Netflix movie. And again, that's not necessarily like a the bad thing I think it sounds like.
Yeah, because
But I just wasn't wooed.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because I think that's almost an insult to The Killer. Because when I think of the term a Netflix movie, what I'm thinking of is the Red Notices of the world, the Gray Man. I don't know, all those action, big budget, star-driven
That's
movies
fair.
with The Rock, whatever it is this time around, and they definitely don't have the technical finesse of a Fincher. They even have worse stories than this. Like, they are very much like, this is a simple story. It still stands on its own. Whilst when people talk about the Netflix movie, I think they talk about those more so because they all seem to culminate in one big blur, because they all just seem like the same movie done over
That's
and over
fair.
again. And I don't think The Killer is.
That's also like genre specific to the action movies that Netflix makes, because they
Mhm.
do make dramas, they do make comedies,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
do make, a lot of other things, I think even like Netflix's anime has its own kind of particular flavor to it or whatever. As Netflix grows, maybe we'll see other bigger directors come to Netflix and do more movies that are more like middle of the ground movies and not, these huge big deal flicks. And it might fill that area more where we don't have just pure crap Netflix, but we have a little higher tier. And that's probably where I would put something like The Killer, because I didn't hate The Killer,
Mhm.
but I do think that I disagree that the idea that this movie isn't derivative and it stands on its own ground. I think the idea that, oh, a hitman has been wronged in some way or fashion by the people that he works for, and now he's going to like kill his way up the tree and deal with it. Man, we've seen like 30 of those movies.
Yeah.
I've played that video game like 12 times, man. Like, this to me, this isn't an original story. And I think that's what kind of bothered me. I think what made it fun is the sum up of what you said is that you spend this a huge amount of time listening to this guy be cocky as hell. He messes up, and then he's quiet afterward because he's like completely lost confidence.
Yeah.
And I do like that. I don't like how long it takes to get there.
Hmm.
It's a little bit much. He's incredibly repetitive. It's for a reason that he keeps repeating these rules over and over and over again. But there's just so many times that I became bored of it
Mhm.
almost.
Yeah, I want to quickly add on to the
Go ahead.
or like just clarify the statement, because you're definitely right. The story, the general plot points of killer fails the job, gets hunted, has to clean up. That's definitely, you're absolutely right. That's a story we have seen a million times. I think just in the nuances is what I meant, that this stands on its own with exactly that, with the mantra he says to himself, with the character development.
It is different.
Yeah, that's more so what I meant.
It is different, and it does have its uniqueness. I think there's a place for it. I just don't think it's, one that I really, really enjoyed the ride of necessarily. Like I said, I didn't hate it.
Mhm.
I want to talk about this early. A lot of this movie, like you said, a good portion of this movie is looking out this window
Yeah.
and looking at what's going on across the way.
Mhm.
And I definitely want to talk about where this movie stands on its own feet in a moment. But I want to just quickly look back at Rear Window
Mhm.
and talk about what it took to make these two scenes happen. And I watched some extra stuff for this movie, some behind the scenes stuff and whatnot. There's not a lot, to be really honest. They're all really short bits of kind of overlapping technical knowledge and stuff.
Mhm.
But a lot of them focus basically on this opening bit of looking through the window with Fassbender. They used 9 cameras in this one window scene. And they're all incredibly large, incredibly expensive, super sophisticated cameras. but they built this whole rig into this wall, and they really are looking at like another building across the way, and then they composite a sky behind it, and they composite some other stuff, right?
Mhm.
I thought that this movie's whole window scene was vastly unimpressive compared to Rear Windows, despite
Hmm.
how much more money and skills were thrown at this.
I'm not actually sure if more money was thrown at it, at least like adjusting for inflation, just considering how insane the set is that they built for Rear Window. But yeah, I understand what you mean with a little underwhelming almost the way Fincher spends his money. Because that's an interesting point to bring up. The visual effects work David Fincher does, I think, is one of the most fascinating things about him, because his effects never really stand out. A lot of the visual effects work he does is invisible visual effects work with, I don't know, in Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, I know that there's like a scene where they literally just adjusted the hair of her to match the other shot, and they just CGI'd over her hair, and nobody would ever know, but he just wanted it for the continuity. And that was a pretty expensive shot due to that, but he's just such a perfectionist with stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, they added for this movie, they added all of the lens flares and any like gleaming of lights and stuff are artificial, and a fair amount of the lighting is artificial too, actually, in this movie. So I could see him doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see the point of it being not very, that's not the most riveting effects work. There's no, not a lot of extra enjoyment you get out of that, but I highly value it. Like I absolutely appreciate the fuck out of Fincher using the technology the way he does.
I guess for me is just that when I saw that and I went back and I rewatched that beginning opening scene, there are so many sweeping shots. There are so many shots that have this blur effect to them almost when you sweep from one window to the next. I just wondered, could this have been achieved with a lot less cameras? And like, did this? I don't want to use the word pretentious. I don't want to throw that word around so much. But like, when Netflix hands you like a butt ton of money to make a movie with, I get why you might want to go all out, right? But there are parts of me that wonder if, they had all these cameras, they made all this rig, and they're like, we spent a lot of money on this scene. We should make this scene a good portion of the film. let's milk the crap out of the scene, because we got like, a lot of hours worth on each one of these cameras.
I think talking about the whole, you already mentioned that you thought the point where we get to, oh, everything went wrong and now he needs to clean up, that you think it took too long to get there. I actually love that a lot. I think the way it all builds up and then kind of denies you the satisfaction of the finished job, of like since the hit has gone wrong and it happens so quickly after so much setup for it, I think that's kind of amazing. I love that he plays with your emotions really, and I think it's absolutely on purpose to try to annoy you to a degree. And yeah, I was here for that.
That's fair. I think it could have been achieved in a short amount of time, but I do appreciate the like. It's super funny, honestly. That he just messes up.
Yeah.
I will say though, when he's lining up the shot and he's getting ready to take the shot, I literally was like, "Why is this your shot? Why is this the one you're taking? This is a terrible shot. The lady's dancing wildly in front of this man. Why is this the shot you're taking?" And then he took it, and I was like, "This guy sucks. This is a terrible hit, man. What the hell?"
Yeah, I think it has to do with overconfidence, right? And also like he has been waiting for quite a while for this guy to arrive at this apartment, I think there's just a mixture of, oh, it has to happen now, I am perfect anyways, and also an addition of tunnel vision where he's so focused on that guy that he might have like missed the fact that she is moving in front of the shot in the last moment.
The immediate perception is that this is a highly trained, really, really great killer who has made a mistake.
Yeah.
Right? Is there the chance that this guy isn't that great and that just he, like you said, is overconfident and that this is just the portrayal of a guy who really thinks he's really good, but isn't that great, but continues to like kind of have that confidence throughout the thing. Because I mean,
I'd instantly cut you off there and say he is, due to the fact that I believe, and we're getting into a little bit of a meta interpretation of this movie now, I believe that this film is somewhat a reflection on David Fincher's filmography.
okay,
I think Fincher sees himself in that dude, and the perfectionist behavior of the protagonist is David Fincher's approach to filmmaking, to having every shot perfect, to have the lighting perfect, have everything work together, from effects work to practical stuff to, I think there was like a headline, I don't know if it's true, but I remember reading it, that this film averaged 50 takes per shot. You know, he is that
ridiculous.
crazy perfectionist. And people have theorized that the job gone wrong the first time he messed up might be Fincher directly addressing Mank, because a lot of Fincher fans waited for 6 years for Mank to release. You know, I think there was never such a big time gap between two Fincher films, and fans, you know, were starving for another one of his films, and many people see Gone Girl as one of his best. So the expectations were high, to say the least. And then quite a lot of people were pretty disappointed by what they got delivered in the end. And I think the fact that, you know, this guy striving for perfection with each and every shot and never having one single miss, and then all of a sudden he does miss, is very much Fincher talking about his own filmography.
It's an interesting way to look at that, yeah.
So I think, yes, to get to that point, I think he is very much, he never failed at a thing before. I think this is his first experience of, oh shit, what now? Like, I'm not familiar with this happening to me.
That almost makes me like it less. I kind of like it better when he's just like actually just an overly confident like moron. But you know, I do respect the introspective being about the director itself kind of aspect of that. The opening of this movie directly kind of has really Fight Clubby vibes. Kind of shifts out of that, but it kind of holds that, like we were talking about earlier, like really feels early 2000s to me.
I can add on to the Fight Club thing, because
Yeah.
the IndieWire journalist David Ehrlich also draws comparison to Fight Club. You know, obviously both excessively use narration of somewhat narcissistic narrator.
Yes.
It is also Fincher's most famous and infamous movie, going from a box office flop to a retrospective success with home video releases, being successful from a critic's perspective, but also from a financial perspective. And then again, having this transformation a second time. Fight Club is infamously a misunderstood movie. You know, it's one of those literally me film bro movies that
100%, yes.
where the biggest fans of Fight Club, to a big degree, absolutely misunderstand the toxic masculinity side of the story and embrace that side of the story as if it was, you know, celebrating it. The nameless killer of Fassbender seems almost like an over-exaggerated version of this literally me character, like Tyler Durden was.
Mm-hmm.
You could look at it that way, that the job that Fincher botched in his career was not making it clear enough that it is that Fight Club is a criticism of that, and that in hindsight, it might have done more damage than it did good, that Fight Club maybe wasn't a successful kill after all, but that was the failed attempt.
I guess that makes me question, though, in this movie, Fassbender then goes to clean up, right?
Mhm.
And he kind of does a like shit job of it. I don't know. It's, you know, he says, screw the system I'm in, screw all this, I'm just going to kill them all and make my way up it and just burn the system down as I go, right?
Mhm.
How does that reflect what Fassbender's doing? Is that like, I'm going to start making movies for Netflix and screw the Hollywood system?
I think to a degree it is, because the last studio thing Fincher really did was Gone Girl. Ever since then, he worked together with streaming services, Mindhunter and
That's true.
what's it called? The anthology short miniseries Love and Death and Robots or something like that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that one's good.
Yeah, that was a Fincher project. Mank was his first film for Netflix, and now the next film, The Killer, is also a Netflix production. So yeah, I think that could very much be a reflection of him leaving the old system behind and finding new roads to work in.
I wish I knew more about the source material of this movie, because
Mhm.
in the same way that I wish I knew more about the source material of Gone Girl, I have heard enough of it to know some of the major differences between the film and the Fincher version, or the Fincher version in the book. Chuck Palahniuk's the book Fight Club.
Fight Club, yeah.
Yeah, I never managed to finish it. I was not good about reading when I was younger. But I know enough about it to see a lot of the differences. And he makes some really interesting choice differences in that movie. He switches the main characters' names. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, interesting. No,
which is like kind of a big deal, because only one of them actually has a name.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which again, the character here is nameless again, so it might be a reflection of that,
Exactly. But so I wonder, how many things are changed from this movie, because I think that for me, what makes a really good Fincher movie feel like a Fincher movie is how he attacks a really good story.
Mhm.
He adds so many layers to the Fight Club story. He adds all these visual cue layers and stuff that are so unique in that film, hiding things in frames, having, Tyler pop in and out of scenes before he gets there.
Yeah.
None of that kind of stuff is in The Killer. It doesn't feel like that. It just feels like it's like, I am a skilled director. I'm using technical skills, basic stuff that are really good, but I'm not introducing or being experimental in any way here.
I think that is really the meta level of talking about his filmography are the changes here. I didn't read it fully. I wasn't too invested in the comic, but I read half of The Killer, like the original graphic novel.
Very cool. Very cool.
And in the first half, there are a lot of changes to the story. And the major reason as to what those changes do, I feel like, is represent Fincher more. In the graphic novel, in those monologues before his failed kill attempt, he talks about how he had only messed up once before. So this isn't his first mistake, it is his second mistake in the graphic novel. I don't think the character is that much of a perfectionist in the graphic novel. And one thing that I expected was to have literal frames taken from the graphic novel and applied to that early sequence, because everything just looked so precise in the film version that I kind of expected it to be a very faithful adaptation.
Just straight lifted.
Yeah, but it isn't really. I didn't find that much of it. So I think Fincher very much made his own thing of it.
Okay.
Just in a subtle way. It's weird. I still wanna add onto the whole meta Fincher thing. There's this quote, "I'm not here to judge. I serve no cause, no country, no flag. I'm here to do that job." I think that could be seen as Fincher directly addressing his cold presentation of his characters. A lot of people take issue in, for example, his portrayal of Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network. That movie also went through some changes in how it's perceived. Initially, in 2010, upon release, a lot of people heavily criticized it for going too hard on this young genius entrepreneur. And yet over time, with better understanding of the real Zuckerberg, people grow frustrated with the portrayal and it being not harsh enough about this guy and his data mining and his kind of supervillain nature almost. But I think Fincher was never there to judge this man one way or the other. He portrayed him as he saw him, and he did the job.
He also, just as a funny note, it's been recorded many times, I guess, but he talks like a frat boy too in real life.
Yeah.
He says things like bro and dude all the time and stuff. I thought that was funny, because that's definitely not how Fincher portrayed him at all.
One final cute little detail about his meta thing. 9-inch nails penetrate his lungs. It is literally the line when he kills the lawyer guy. And, it's very well known that Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross do most of Fincher's soundtracks ever since, I think Social Network was the first one. I might be
Okay.
mistaken there, but for quite a few movies now, all the soundtracks have been by them. And they are the two members of 9-Inch Nails, the band.
Yes.
So, yeah, there's a very obvious nod there.
That's playing from the Killers song that he's listening to. It's the Killers, right? I think.
No, he says that in a voiceover line when he kills the lawyer.
Oh, okay. I see
Used
what you're saying.
a nail gun to, kill
That
that
makes
guy.
sense. Yeah. Okay. I do also think, real quick, that the dude listening to the Killers in the headphones just cracks me up. It's just not music you expect. Like, I'm gonna go be precise and kill somebody, and then they put on that, and you're like, oh, okay. I knew what kind of guy you were in high school.
Yeah. I think it's also awesome that they chose the Smiths not only for the way the sound sounds and that it kind of counteracts the visual side you see, and you wouldn't expect a killer to listen to, that indie rock kind of thing. But also, Morrissey, the lead singer of the Smiths, has had some controversies, and he's connected to the alt-right, to the far right, and it's kind of at this point to such a heavy degree that I wouldn't have expected the Smiths to be represented in any movie anymore because of the connection they have to far right politics. But here it absolutely makes sense. That character is very much not a person to look up to. He's very much not a person to strive for or anything. No. And again, which is something that should have been clear in a movie like Fight Club with Tyler Durden, that shouldn't have been someone to strive to. So it makes absolute sense that that character would also listen to music that maybe is questionable in nowadays.
A fun little fact about that is I once had a relationship with this very hippie vegan girl that I was vegan with and all this stuff for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
She was very, left, very, very, liberal person and stuff. But one of her favorite bands in the whole world was Morrissey. So that's a fun bit of thing I get to think about now that I didn't know before this.
Interesting one.
I think when he finally gets to Mexico and the movie moves on,
I think it's Colombia.
Thank you. Yeah, he goes to Colombia. It almost has that effect on me where I wish maybe that this was a limited series rather than a movie. The way the chapters are kind of set up, I think I would have maybe got more out of it if each one was a little more delved into. The way that they set this up, you just spend so much time at that window that it doesn't, I think, balance well with the rest of the film. The rest of the film feels like there's a lot of things happening for that short amount of time, which might also be somehow reflective to Fincher. I think that his choice to go kill his way up the tree or whatever is really dumb. I think it's not a great choice. I wonder if that is also reflective somehow on Fincher. I don't know. I think just this would have benefited from the same amount of care as that first scene had, the rest of this movie.
Yeah, I also think that the first third is the strongest part of this film. I'm not a big fan of the very ending of it, and a lot of people expressed that they felt a little unsatisfied by the end. But we'll get to that.
Just to jab in there for a second, you keep saying, first third. I haven't looked at like what the timestamps are or whatever, so I totally believe that the window ending scene or whatever, that's the third of the way into the film. But because of
I think so, yeah.
But because of the way this movie's kind of partitioned out, the way they set it out, it feels like you have the window scene, you have him fighting his way through everything, and then you have like a very tiny ending.
Yeah.
It doesn't really feel like a third of a movie. It feels like half of the movie, almost half of the movie, and then like a little dessert tray on the end.
Yeah.
It doesn't really have a traditional feel of a beginning, middle, of an end of a movie to me.
Yeah, I get that.
But yeah, he gets to Colombia. A dumb choice to go back home. It's just so dumb. It seems like he
Yeah.
knows all these rules, and why is he not following them? Why is he not doing the things he's supposed to be doing or whatever? Like, I mean, I get, he's gonna die, or I don't know. It just
I think why I kind of wasn't too annoyed by that is the idea of if this is his very first mistake, then he was never confronted with the concept of, oh, my actual boss might be going after me now. And since that's the only guy who knows about his private life, really, about, his home in Colombia, I don't think he expected it. But I can see how that would be frustrating.
I do think a little bit that you're like, hey, I'm gonna do this big job for you of killing a man. What happens if I fuck up? Would be part of the interview process. But
Yeah.
that's fair.
I can see that, yeah. Fair enough.
You'd want to go over all those contingencies and stuff.
One thing that I wanted to talk about, however, about the everything past the incident, is how his mantra that he repeats every time strays further from reality every time it comes back.
Ooh, what do you mean?
He repeats all of those rules he has to follow, don't improvise, trust no one, don't show empathy or whatever.
Yeah.
And pretty much every time it returns after the first one, he breaks one more of those rules.
Okay, I only noticed one.
I know that he improvised with like the Floridian guy. He showed empathy with the woman.
Yeah.
I would need to check all the kills again to really refresh my mind. It's been a few weeks at this point.
See, okay, because the one I'd seen, which is the woman, and we'll get there eventually, talk more about that. But that one is, fairly later in the movie. That was the first one I noticed. And then I thought about it after I'd watched it, and I was like, oh man, I wonder if there was more of those that he went against. But if there was, I don't feel like maybe they were shown well enough. Or actually, thinking about it a little even harder, maybe that was, David Fincher's hiding things in the movie the way he does, with Fight Club and stuff. It's just differently hiding it in a different format almost. But I definitely didn't notice these.
Yeah, I think that's just like kind of representative of Fincher again, because he is, those things we talked about with not portraying Zuckerberg as a clear villain or a clear good guy, with not making it very clear that Tyler Durden isn't a great person to strive for. That's just his way of telling stories. I think that's his way of not making things too obvious and being subtle about it.
I would say that's more on the author than that is on Fincher, because Fincher kind of is showing that character already for who he is. All those things already exist within that character.
I understand that, and we know that Fincher isn't a writer; he is a director. But the fact that all of his filmography, maybe with the exception of Mank, feels like this whole project and feels like it would apply to author theory and stuff like that, with reoccurring themes throughout the filmography and stuff like that.
It definitely has an impact on, he's choosing specific projects with reoccurring themes.
Exactly.
That definitely paints a picture of him. I just don't know if I would attribute him to the picture rather than saying that the picture is attributed to him. Or you know what I mean? Like, I don't, it's, come or go. But I definitely get what you mean.
To go back to my point, which we left a while ago, with him moving further and further away of respecting his own rule set, I think that you could make the argument that him going back home is the first instance of him not following all the perfect rules of how to live this life. Or even earlier on, you could make the argument that having a relationship, having a home really with someone who could get hurt along the way was already the first time he didn't really apply to his own mindset of being that perfect, invincible guy. Probably why I didn't hate that part of the story, because, it shows the human imperfections even within that guy who thinks of himself as a perfectionist.
Stylistically, I think this movie is very different than even Gone Girl. Do you think that this movie dropping a lot of what I would consider like Fincher style specifically, and shifting that and changing that and focusing that differently. Do you think that that is representative of his like I'm gonna break all my rules?
I haven't thought about it that way. Do you have an example of like things of like shots or moments that don't feel Fincher or like classical Fincher style to you in this movie?
Especially with, like, if you remember, I've only seen like Gone Room, Panic Room, or Gone Girl, Panic Room. You know, a couple
Mm.
handful of movies. Something that I've seen that he seems to like to do is either visually foreshadowing or just straight up foreshadowing. But it seems like that seems like something he likes to do. You know, dropping Tyler Durden in within flashes of scenes before he arrives
Hmm.
at certain moments. You know, the Gone Girl. There's a lot of things that when you rewatch that movie, you go, "Oh, you know, you've seen the movie, you know what I'm
Yeah,
talking about."
yeah.
So that's something that I don't feel like exists in this movie at all. There doesn't feel like there's any foreshadowing or any like deeper layering that isn't meta. Like you're showing me a lot of this meta layer that represents Fincher, which is really cool. But within like especially something like you know, Fight Club, there's layers that represent the movie. There's different things happening within the movie that represent different parts of the movie. And I feel like this movie isn't doing that as much as it is just being a reflection of Fincher.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure if that was like a again conscious decision on the part of him trying to change it up.
Hmm.
I think it's part of why I don't think this is one of the great Fincher movies.
Is because it lacks those things.
Exactly. Because
That's kind of why I thought so. Yeah.
though it has some additional layers, as we already pointed out, all of the meta stuff, but it doesn't have those additional layers within the quite literal story, and I think it lacks those. Yeah. So I'd call it more so as a flaw than like a conscious. But maybe it is.
If
Maybe it is. Who knows?
you know, I think this really lacks that flavor.
I think there's one thing that I just realized. This movie, I feel like, has more handheld camera than maybe any David Fincher film before that. So that you couldn't make an argument that that is one thing that he breaks in his own rules. Usually, the only way cameras move in Fincher movies is either on like a dolly in a perfectly robotic way, or even there's the shot in Girl with the Dragon Tattoo where it's that was one of the first use cases of a programmed camera arm moving. Like he pioneered a lot of that stuff, where it's
Okay.
literal mechanical precision with which the camera moves, almost in like a ghostly, perfect way. And this movie strives further away from that than I think he ever did. So you could make an argument that maybe that's his way of breaking his own rules. That
Okay. I dig that. I dig that. You know, like I said at the beginning, and maybe, you know, calling it a Netflix movie isn't the right, you know, terminology. I do still stand by that. I think that it's, you know, a movie that has a lot of really beyond competence, a lot of skill behind it. It's just
yeah.
a lot like its story to me. It's used in a boring way. It's like saying that, like, you know, you could take a skilled director and you could say, I need you to capture this dynamic shot of a cat jumping over a fence. And I want you to try to get, you know, a really interesting angle and, you know, do a lot of really interesting things with it and
Mhm.
be experimental. And they can do that and come up with all, you know, ideas. Or you can still take that same director and be like, I want you to, you know, do a tracking shot of this cat and I want you to do it really, really well. And a shitty director will not do that tracking shot as well as a extremely precise director will, right?
Yeah.
You can tell that like this every inch, every bit of movement, the speed, every bit of it is entirely calculated by that director, right? It's
Mhm.
done. That's where I feel like this is that second scenario is almost like wasting the skill of a talented director versus a skilled director. Fight Club feels like a talented movie. This movie feels skilled. And I don't know if that
Mhm.
translates the same exactly.
Yeah, I can follow your thought. It's an interesting way to look at it for sure.
You know, we talked about the breaking of the rules and specific rules. The one, you know, like I said, that really stood out to me was the neck. I think that that's probably the one that stood out to most people the most. It's very blatant. It's very out there. He breaks her neck, lets her die of an accident.
Hmm.
You know, she's very expositionally is like my family, I wish there was just more of that. I wish there was more characterization in this character because he felt
Mhm.
so like nothing to me so often, which I get is part of his character. But I mean, he's got a wife in Colombia. He's got to have some kind of personality, right?
Mhm.
He listens to terrible music choices. And then, we go through all these killings, all these actions, and we finally reach the end dude, who I
The
don't know if
Floridian.
this, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know if this word is going to translate to you at all, but I would hope that just the way it sounds is enough. But this is the smarmiest looking dude I've ever seen. Like he is just a rat like dude who's just like, "Eh," and I hate him, and I can't believe he doesn't kill him. I cannot believe he doesn't kill this guy.
Do you talk about the billionaire?
I'm talking about the guy who ordered the kill. Yeah, I'm talking about
Oh.
he finally
Mhm.
reaches the last guy that's like the dude who pushed the button that is like, I am gonna have your family killed. And his whole thing is like, look, man, I just saw the thing said clean up the mess. He's like, I never thought what that would mean. He's like, you get it, right? You get it. And the killer's just like, yeah, man, I get it. And that's it. Like, what? That's what I mean by smarmy. That guy is like just like gross money. Just he's not a pleasant fellow. You know what? Of all the people in the movie, he's the most killable, and
Yeah.
he just absolutely doesn't kill him. And I don't get it. I don't understand that choice, unless unless after everything we've talked about the parallels of Fincher and this character, if it's in the end Fincher selling out to the billionaires.
Yeah, I think to a degree it is, and I'm not happy about that moment either. I have some like little theories about it, but none feel really satisfying.
I'd love to hear him anyways. Yeah.
Yeah, one of them would absolutely be to look at it as, you know, he is reliant on big corporations. A lot of, or like any of his movies are just filled to the brim with product placements. Like Fincher is infamous for that. I think he is using them somewhat tastefully, but it's still product placements of like big companies. There's a McDonald's product placement in there, and it's hidden in a way where, he talks about not standing out of the crowd, being invisible in a world where you can't really be invisible anymore. So he like eats at McDonald's because they serve, I don't know, he drops a number, something like 46 million cheeseburgers a year. So it doesn't matter if he buys one more or less. But it is, at the end of things, it is a product placement by one of the biggest corporations in the world.
100%.
You could look at it as addressing that fact that even with, capitalist criticism in Fight Club, at the end of things, Fincher is still, relying on those people.
Oh man, I have to really think about all the product placement. I can't think of all the product placement he's done in movies. So I might have to go do a deep dive on that later because damn, man.
Yeah, he hides them somewhat well. That's why I kind of can't really complain about it, because it means we get more big budget Fincher films, and I'm here for that,
Something I think is really interesting. Product placement and it being seen as this negative thing is inherently a Western world idea. In Japan, when they make like a video game or like a movie, right? People actually prefer it to have real world products in it because to them, when you have these fake products like Pepsi or something that's not like the real thing, it's kind of off, that takes them out of it. It makes
Mhm.
them look at it and go, oh, what? Oh, it's supposed to be this. But they prefer it when it's real things. Also, there's so many types of companies and brands in Japan that there's like a sense of loyalty for a lot of those kind of people. So, like, if they
Mm.
see a character in a movie pulls out that specific candy bar, they're like, I love that candy bar. That's cool. You know what I mean? They just
Yeah.
treat it really different than we do. They do not mind it at all, and it's very much like incorporated into a lot of Japanese stuff. So I think that's really interesting that even in Europe, people are like, God, I hate that product placement.
I'm somewhat indifferent towards it. Like, as I said, I barely ever go to McDonald's or something like that. I'm not here to support a corporation like that. At the same time, I am aware of how expensive movies are. I am
Mhm.
aware of how expensive as we already mentioned, particularly Fincher's approach to movies is. So I know that it takes a lot of money, and that has to come from somewhere. I'm not oblivious to the fact.
Did you have another theory on why he doesn't kill that guy?
Yeah, there's this side of it where he talks in the beginning about being part of the one or of the many, which is this kind of Sigma male mentality, I guess, which again directly addresses the whole Fight Club thing. You could make the point that since he wants to be a one and not one of the many throughout the film, and only by the end accepts that he isn't, you could say that he respects the billionaire because he actually made it. He is definitely a one. There's not that many billionaires who can just afford to kill whoever. There's not that many people even who can get a hit job on him, specifically. And even if it failed, he is one. It's not very satisfying, but it's something I thought about.
I think I almost hate that one more.
Yeah, same.
God, that sucks. It's almost like, hey, you know what? That literally me character? Yeah. It's almost like that guy is really cool. But it's also, oh God, no, I just hate all the ending, all the ways you can really attack the ending of this movie really bothered me. I think it's a big part of why this movie just isn't amazing for me. It just doesn't really hit amazing altitudes for me, Yeah, the cinematography is really good. Yeah, the shots are really good. I'd like to look more into these, the underlying things about the breaking the rules. But none of that just adds up to a total sum, especially when you cap it with this.
Yeah.
Your entire journey is capped with this moment. It's, me and you have talked before about movies that don't have that are left open ended, and I know you kind of like movies that are left open ended and question what happens, and I prefer to have the answer. I don't think either of us liked this answer or this ending. Like this is the worst way to go. What so anticlimactic.
This isn't an amazing movie. I think it's a perfectly good movie, and it has a lot of charms with different sides and different aspects of qualities, but it lacks something, and it is really more interesting for me to think about than to rewatch this at any time.
Yeah. Do you think if this was the same film, right, and it wasn't Fincher, dropping all the meta stuff and just leaving it at the raw stuff of what it is as a film, it's just a perceived story, do you think this would have much the same pull?
No, at least not to me.
That's kind of how I feel about
it. The fact that I'm watching a Fincher movie and I'm realizing the talk about perfectionism made me think about all of those things, If I just watched the very same story by, I don't know, as a first-time director, I wouldn't think, oh yeah, that relates in so many ways to his filmography. That's just something that couldn't exist otherwise.
Yeah. And that begs like a deeper question of, like how much value does a movie have outside of its content? This movie has added value because of the retrospective of Fincher's career, right? But does that make it a better film? I don't know. That's up to each person to decide if that really adds up.
That's an absolutely personal.
Yeah. I don't think it does necessarily. But that said, if this movie was made by somebody I really loved, I'd be like, it totally does. It totally adds to it. So, that might be just me.
I have a final thing to go a bit into. We haven't talked about the acting at all. And I quickly want to point out Fassbender is great in this. I love that he is back because he took a break for a few years, and this is kind of his return to the big screen. I love Tilda Swinton and the little role she gets at the end. I think she did an amazing job as always. I think one part about the ending that this feels a little unsatisfying is that there's so many points where it feels like the movie is already ending. Where, oh, he killed this person now. Okay, now we're coming to an end. Oh no, he has still this person to kill, I guess. Okay, now we're coming to an end. Oh, we're still doing this. And I enjoyed the sequences on their own, but I was kind of almost annoyed by the repetition of it all. And then I thought, maybe I already mentioned the supposed 50 average takes. Thinking of it now, maybe Fincher treats the viewer like he treats his actors. He makes us go through these things again and again and again. And I kind of like that
So,
thought.
I'm not going to lie, my wife was sitting there next to me. I was watching this and she was playing a video game. And she literally just paused her game at one point. And she was like, how many times is he going to tell us his damn rules?
Yeah. To summarize it, the story may be basic on its own, but Fincher's technical precision and the performances of everyone really elevated the experience to me. The whole self-aware story regarding his craft is really what I could cling to, and one of the core ideas of the author theory, is this putting every film into perspective of what has the filmmaker done before. And I think this is just almost like a film about author theory more so than a film about the graphic novel. And just that on its own is an interesting and fascinating thing to me. So I had a great time, not Fincher's best by any stretch of the imagination, but yeah, still an interesting movie. At our next appointment, we are going to talk about the filmography of Emerald Fennell. The actor turned director is one of the most promising female voices in the current filmic landscape. Starting off, we will talk about her 2020 directorial debut, Promising Young Woman, which tackles themes like toxic masculinity from the perspective of the revenge-driven protagonist Cassandra, played by Carey Mulligan. It also stars Bo Burnham and Alison Brie.
Our second prescription is also Emerald's second and newest film. Saltburn is a 2023 black comedy / psychological thriller starring Perry Keegan, Jacob Elordi, Rosamund Pike, and Richard E. Grant. This Amazon Prime original about obsession has already garnered itself 2 Golden Globe nominations for the Best Actor and Best Supporting Actress.
If you don't want to get spoiled for either of these movies, make sure to check them out by our next appointments 2 weeks from now. My name is George.
And my name is Devyn.
And you are listening to Medicinema.